here from Remo Nutrients R&D, and in today's episode we're going to be capping off our hop test garden by showing you the final installment, which is drying our hops. Now all the hops have been taken off the vine and they're ready to go, and I'll show you the techniques that I use in order to dry, maximize the flavor, and then package so that they last the longest amount of time. Now the general consensus online is you get about 4 to 6 ounces of wet weight for every 1 ounce of dry weight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be measuring my dry weight and then I'm going to times it by 5 in order to get my wet weight. Now a lot of people online, in order to boost up their numbers and show how great their harvest was, they measure their yield in wet weight, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because depending on the maturity of the flower, it can vary in weight, and this is evidence from the 4 to 6 to 1 and not the, say, 5 to 1 ratio. So I'm going to measure it wet, times it by 5, and we'll get our final yield. And I'm super psyched because I know I got pounds of these things on these plants. All right guys, I'll take you to my garden and I'll show you what we're doing. Alright, I've stripped the vines completely bare, and I've left them hanging on the lines until the end of the season. So the rationale behind this is that we want to make sure that the roots still have a chance to expand into the dirt until the point where they die out on top. And they'll come back next year, and that's where you get your second year mature growth. But I've stripped them completely bare, and I'm wishing at this point that I spaced out my trellises a little bit better. They kind of tangled in with each other, and it took me about 6 days in total to get all of the hops off the vine. But here we go, we're all stripped, and we'll move on to drying. Okay folks, so here's the absolute last of my hops, and these are kind of a little bit small, and I'm not horribly impressed with these ones, but the yield has been good enough that I'm willing to take this. Now, usually in the first year you're going to get hops that are kind of small. So this one here in comparison to this one, this one here is not very impressive. But I mean, realistically speaking, I'll take what I can get, and I'll count this as yield either way. Now I've gone online, and a lot of people, they gauge their yield by wet weight, and so they'll say, oh well, I got a pound of hops per plant. Now, I don't understand this because having picked this later on in the season, so I've already done some picking, a lot of these hops are a little bit lighter just because they're starting to get into the end of their life cycle. So I'd like to calculate dry weight in the end, and that'll give me a better representation of what I'm going to be able to use. And also when you're making beer, you generally measure things out by dry weight anyway. So this here I'm assuming is going to be about 5 ounces of dry weight. It could be a little bit more than that, but this is my kind of bottom of the barrel. Now just before I put things in the dehydrator, I want to just take a quick glance at some of these cones and see which ones I don't necessarily want to include in the bunch, because just because they're there doesn't mean they're necessarily going to add much. Now I've done quite a bit of picking out, but if you look, you get some here after picking and they'll have some stem. So I just go through them and I pick off some of the stems, just because the stems aren't going to add anything to your beer, but the hops will. So if there are any added stems or anything, it's not going to really do much in terms of damage to your end product. But it also kind of falsifies the weight. Okay, and the dehydrator that I'm going to be using is this Nesco Dehydrator. Now I picked this up on an incentive plan through my grocery store, and I've used it a million times, so I'm extremely happy with it. Now this is where I'm going to get the most criticism, because I went online and I tried to find out what the optimum temperature was to dry your hops at. Now some people were saying that 120 is ideal, and they say that commercial drying facilities, they go between 135 and 145, but then I've also heard that anything above 105 you're going to be vaporizing some of the humulin and lupulin that are inside the hops, and it causes a reduced flavor. Now if that's the case, and we're going to be, and 105 is my benchmark in order to get absolutely all the flavors in there, I want to be able to dry below 105. Now some people are going to kill me for saying that, but realistically, you look at any food product, and low and slow generally yields some better taste. It just takes a little bit longer to dry. To ensure that I get the appropriate temperature, I just use this roasting thermometer, and it's very, very easy to use. And the way that the thermometer works is the way that the dehydrator works is it pumps air through the middle and also pumps air through the sides. So it pumps air through the sides downward and pumps air through the middle, either upward or downward. I'm not exactly sure the dynamics of the air. But I throw this probe in the middle section of the the dehydrator, and that'll give me an accurate representation of the temperature or core internal temperature, and I want it to stay below 105. So if I can play around the 95 to 100 range, and it takes me a day, that's fine. I usually just throw this in the garage and let it stink up the garage, and it takes about a day or so. So I'm going to load these into the hop trays, and we'll go from there. Okay, we've added the last of our hops to the dehydrator trays, so everything's being stacked single layer. And I'm going to be transferring these out into the garage. Now, they get a little bit pungent when you start to dry them out. The whole point of hops is to add a bitter aroma to the beer. And so you start heating these things up and they just start to stink. So you put them out in the garage, you leave them out there, you can let your garage stink to holy hell, and it keeps your house smelling like a house. So as I said again, we're going to dry these between 95 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit for roughly, I guess, 20 to 24 hours, depending on the consistency. And we'll see where we go from there. Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Okay, it's been about 2.5 hours since we first put our hops in the dehydrator, and if we check our temps, we're running 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I don't really want to play with this too much because this is an analog control and it's not really that accurate. So as long as I'm between 90 to 100, I can keep it in there and it'll retain all those flavor profiles. Now, there are people online who are going to say you want to dry your hops down to 8 to 10% moisture content, and in order to actually achieve these numbers, you've got to do a math formula, you've got to do a bunch of ways of your wet and your dry product. I just find this too complex. So I use the standard pinch test, and when a hop is wet, it's spongy and doesn't really have any kind of crunch to it. When I feel that it's adequately dry, when you squeeze it, it should sound like you're squeezing some thin, like tracing paper or very thin paper. You don't want it dissolving in your hand, so you want it to retain its form. You also don't want to feel inside the hop and have any kind of wet, spongy feeling inside. So this has got a long way to go, probably about 20 hours more. And so I'm going to leave it in there. We'll let it dry, and we'll come back in a couple of hours and I'll show you what a dried hop looks like. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay folks, it's been about 20 hours of drying, and I just want to make sure that my temps are spot on. So we're sitting at 101 degree Fahrenheit. Now, that's about as hot as I'm going to want it. And the reason why there's the temperature increase is because the moisture inside the hops actually cooled down the dehydrator, or the base of the dehydrator. So the temperature is going to slowly increase over time. And as long as it sits in the range that I'm looking for, I have no problem with this. Now, this is what the final product should look like. Okay. I'll pull this one out here. So if you can hear, when I push it between my hands, you should get this kind of papery sound to it, but it's not exploding in my hands. Now there are some that are going to come off just because it is dried, but for the most part it's retaining its shape. So I'm going to take those and I'm going to put them into a vacuum bag, and we're going to seal them up airtight and put them in the freezer, and they should last between 6 to 8 months. Okay, I was going to go inside, but it turns out that the wifey is busy in there, so I'm going to do everything out in the garage here, and I'm going to dose everything out in 1-ounce bags. Now, it makes it easy for when you make beer, because when you're producing the beer, you want to add hops during different points during the boil. So if you have it in 1-ounce portions, it's easy to portion it out and apply it during those certain times. Now, I've found that each of these trays holds just under 1 ounce, so I'm going to be doing 1 plus a little bit, and I'll transfer it into this bowl, which I have balanced out on the scale. So I'm going to measure this out, and then we'll put that in the vac machine. Okay, we've got our 1 ounce of hops all dosed out, and as you can see here, let's see if I can get a close up. We're at 1 ounce of hops. Sorry about the focus. Now I'm going to load that into this vac machine. It takes a little bit of oomph to get everything into the bag, so I just pressed it into the bag. It's already been pre-made, so I've sealed off one side. You throw it in the vacuum channel and then it just seals it in the bag. So I'll get that done and I'll show you the end result. Okay, we've got everything bagged up, and I'm just going to seal it in the vacuum sealer, and then we can store it right in the freezer. tough thing about these is getting the hops down into the bag enough so that you can actually seal it down. You can use an oversized bag and that'll help save the problem, but the thing is these bags are really expensive, so I like to use as little as possible. Okay, throw that into the vacuum sealer, pop it down. And there you have it, folks. That's 1 ounce of dried and preserved hop flour. Okay, we'll take it back to the office and I'll show you what I got in total for everything included. Okay, so what you're seeing here is my final yield. I've bagged everything out into 1 ounce bags and I've vac packed them so they're nice and secure and they should last for about 6 to 8 months. Now what you're looking at is 39¼ dry ounces of hops. This translates to 12¼ pounds of wet weight on 4 plants. That's 3 pounds a plant. I am absolutely ecstatic, super impressed, and I'll have enough hops to make beer all year long. Now, I can't honestly say there'd be a lot of things that I do differently. The biggest thing that I do different is probably space out my trellises. Because I topped the hop plants and I encouraged outward growth, these arms that came off the main hop vine started tangling up in each other and it made it really, really difficult to harvest in the end. Other than that, I got 3 pounds on first year plants. I can't complain. All thanks to Remo Nutrients. If you need any more information on our product line, check us out at www.remonutrients.com. And of course, my name is Joel. This has been Remo Nutrients R&D. Thanks for watching.